Welcome to Love for the Truth Radio, a program devoted to encouraging you to be a contender of the faith in an ever-changing church culture. On Love for the Truth Radio, we will discuss current issues and challenging views along with biblical truth that can affect our Christian worldview and how we live out our faith. And now, here's your host, Cindy Hartline.
Welcome to the program. We were promised change in America, and we got it. Now many are concerned about the changes that are going on in our political and educational systems, as well as in our societies and culture. It's obvious that our president and many of our government leaders and church leaders alike have their minds set on liberal goals that are much different from our Judeo Christian law of ethics. And now it is obvious that we are headed in a destructive direction with no moral compass. Right is wrong and wrong is right, or whatever you want to call it, and total lawlessness is the fruit of these belief systems. Postmodern thought suggests that your truth is your truth and my truth is my truth, so we don't have to agree, just get along. Political correctness helps us do just that. All we have to do is tiptoe around everyone's feelings so as not to offend anyone. Political correctness and leftism are guiding our course straight to the throne of the Antichrist, and it's moving with great pace. Paris is a picture of what liberalism and political correctness creates: chaos, lawlessness without liberty, coming soon to America. Well, with us to talk about liberalism, leftism, and the spirit of the Antichrist is Jan Markell, the founder and director of Olive Tree Ministries. Jan has authored 8 books, including Trapped in Hitler's Hell as a co-author with Anita Dittman. Jan hosts Understanding the Times with co-host Eric Barger, a broadcast which airs on almost 700 stations across North America. Jan Markell also hosts one of the largest apologetics conferences every fall, Understanding the Times, out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. Jan is a veteran and contender of the faith and has learned a wealth of biblical knowledge by interviewing many guests through her radio show. Welcome, Jan Markell. It's a pleasure to have you back on Love for the Truth Radio.
Cindy, thank you for having me.
Jen, one of the enemy's ways of taking over the United States and the world is through a new belief system, one that encompasses all religions. Liberalism is one of the culprits, and now the leftists are evidently in control. Leftism is a left-wing viewpoint, someone who seeks radical social and economic change in the direction of greater equality, and it may sound like a good idea for all mankind. However, personal religious convictions must be set aside in an effort to build a mindset while setting the stage for a one-world religion. I'm going to mention George Friedrich Hegel. He's a 19th century German philosopher who is the most influential philosopher of the left. Now, he's the one who inspired Karl Marx and the American progressives of the early 20th century and university socialists. And to this day, he quoted, "All the worth which the human being possesses, all spiritual reality he possesses, only through the state." Now, that's what we're seeing here today, folks. Leftists will lead us right under government control. And Jen, I know that you would agree that liberalism opposes a biblical worldview because individual conviction and liberties are taken away, and the government becomes our God. And that's what we're seeing today, folks. Jen, I'd like to start off with what's going on in Paris. Why don't you give us paint a picture of the events that are taking place there to start off with?
Well, back a couple weeks ago, we had this disastrous situation in Paris with the, not sure what to call it. It was an ISIS-inspired, ISIS-coordinated attack on innocent folks in Paris. And I think you and I want to talk about just how does this, I'm going to call it the cult of liberalism, the cult of leftism, play into a scenario like that. You used a term a second ago, which is so important. It's so important. I even made a DVD about it a couple of years ago called When Government Becomes God. And to the left, starting with Karl Marx, several hundred years ago now, a couple hundred years ago, government was God, small g, to him and then to all of his followers. And under this a cult of liberalism or this religion of leftism. Let's just take it all the way over to Europe. Let's take it. We can zero in with just France, or we can look at all of Europe. Mm-hmm. Europe is leftist. It is a leftist continent. They believe in diversity, but multiculturalism. Mm-hmm. They treat everyone, even your enemy, well. That's their theory. If you treat everyone, including your enemy, mm-hmm. if you treat them well, such as radical Islam, they will love us. That's the great liberal lie.
Yes.
Treat everybody well, and they'll love you. And rather than the biblical version, mm-hmm. that the heart is deceitful and desperately wicked, and you cannot just treat somebody well and expect them to transform. You can only transform with the saving power of Jesus Christ. So the Islamic Caliphate, in a sentence, Cindy, mm-hmm. the Islamic Caliphate is taking advantage of this naivete that has enveloped Europe because of their leftism, their liberalism, and it's simply expanding their caliphate mm-hmm. from the Middle East to all of Europe. And I mean, many of these refugees, they aren't fleeing anything. Mm-hmm. They're Islamic terrorists making inroads into Europe. But they knew that Europe was nothing but sort of a leftist zone where mm-hmm. they were going to be welcome. Look at Angela Merkel.
Yes.
She says we are going to welcome these people, and we don't care if they outnumber us. We don't care if their birth rate is 20-1, and we have 1 or 2 children per couple. I mean, it's insanity.
Yes.
But liberalism is out of control, and nowhere is it better demonstrated than Europe.
Yes. And if you haven't seen the news, I know there were attacks in 6 different cities in Paris, and I don't know exactly the number of people that were killed or shot by these terrorists. I know one was in a theater. I think one was on during a soccer game, and another one a restaurant. And it happened all around the same time. So if you haven't seen the news, that's what's taking place in Paris. I just wanted to paint a little bit of a picture of what's going on there. And of course, there was a few that blew themselves up. Obviously, this was a terrorist planned attack. And when we see these immigrants come in, from some of the polls or the facts, actually, that I heard was that a lot of them were young men, around 30 years old, that were single. And some of them had a large amount of money on them, like I've heard $10,000 to $20,000. Where's this money coming from? So it doesn't sound like these were all just refugees running for their lives in survival. No. From Syria. These were people that had a plan and an intention. Not all of them. I'm not going to say all of them, but mixed in with the immigrants, we have some of these terrorists who have a plan, and I believe that this is what's going on right now. And why don't we just, you did a great job in explaining about leftism. I think we want to connect the dots just a little bit here, Jan, because you and I know all about leftism. We know about liberalism. We know what it does to people. But why don't we just elaborate a little bit more, if we can, just to explain that to our audience.
Well, let me just say that at Paris, and this is where all the attacks, they were all in mm-hmm. Paris and various sections of Paris, but mm-hmm. Paris is a gun-free zone. And that's the altar of liberalism is gun-free. Mm-hmm. Nobody can protect themselves. Mm-hmm. The criminals can have guns, but nobody can protect themselves. So everything is a gun-free zone in mm-hmm. Paris, and more in America. It's all a gun-free zone as well. Mm-hmm. No one could fight back. No one could protect themselves, and that is what evil seeks out. Innocent people who are the innocent people who are perfect victims because mm-hmm. they pose no danger. And I just had a friend who attended a Minnesota Gopher basketball game a couple of nights ago, mm-hmm. and she walked into this huge stadium. Now, I believe this was a night after this Paris atrocity. Mm. First thing she sees in this great big stadium, we are a gun-free zone. So if you've got a gun on going into a great big stadium, mm-hmm. Unless you can somehow conceal it and cover it up, you can't even enter. So you can't, in the eyes of liberalism, you cannot even go in and defend yourself or your loved ones, because that's just the golden rule of liberalism. We're going to be gun-free. But the problem is when you outlaw guns, only outlaws have the guns.
That's right. That's right. And, from what I understand, is that a lot of the policemen in France did not have guns either.
That is very often the case. And just one other word about this whole thing, because this European issue, because the European nations, they want to be tolerant and they want to be diverse. And they don't question who these people are. They just know that we must welcome them. Even though the thoughts of some of these who are entering into Europe, and I'm certainly not saying all of them, some of them are certainly innocent people who are truly fleeing, but the thoughts of some of them is that they're entering to commit utter destruction. And I think that the concern of most of your listeners, Cindy, not that we aren't concerned about Europe, we are. There are good people over there, and there are some films, there's some clips online that are just heartbreaking as they see these hundreds of thousands of immigrants literally marching
Yes.
almost as if it was an exodus out of Egypt into their land, and who God only knows the transformation that particular city or that particular country is going to go through because of this insanity.
Yes, and to find out that it happened so quickly. I mean, the immigration just began, and here we go. Already terrorists are attacking 6 different cities there. We need to pray for Paris at this point. But that's true. I mean, we have the word you brought up, tolerant. They have to be tolerant and diverse. What's interesting is that these attackers are being more tolerant, it seems, towards the enemy than they are towards Christians or to people that need the help or crying out for help. Boy, we're leading. It sounds like the enemy himself. And just as we had mentioned in the intro, Jan, you didn't get a chance to hear that, but we were talking about liberalism and leftism being the spirit of the Antichrist, the enemy himself.
Yeah.
And that's what we're seeing right now taking place. We see right is wrong, wrong is right, whatever you want to call it, and total lawlessness is the fruit of these belief systems.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed it is. And we have lawlessness in the highest offices of the lands, of capitals of all over the world, starting with Washington, D.C. We have absolute out-of-control lawlessness going on. But Cindy, I believe all of this is setting the stage for the Antichrist.
Right.
I believe, we can talk here, and we can even talk in some kind of despairing tones, though I don't think either one of us are in despair because we know what the Bible has to say, and in the end we win. But it is, I believe, setting the stage for, it's first of all is creating absolute unmitigated chaos around the world. But there's going to come on the scene a man with a plan, a Mr. Fix-It, who will say, I can fix this, I can make all things new. That won't be Jesus Christ at first. It'll be Antichrist at first. Jesus Christ comes, I believe, 7 years later. That's
right. That's exactly right. We see types and shadows of this in our political correctness. That it helps, we have to tiptoe around everyone's feelings as not to offend anyone. And political correctness and leftism, I believe, are guiding our course straight to the throne of the Antichrist, and it's moving with such great pace. What are your thoughts on Obama and his agenda when it comes to the immigration or whatever other plans that he may have?
Well, he has sympathy. I'm going to be really blunt here.
Okay.
Obama was raised in an Islamic environment, and he has sympathy for Islam. It's part of his heritage, and he wants these immigrants in the U.S. and I know he's planning on bringing anywhere from 10,000 to 100,000. I think right now the number is about 10,000. He wants these immigrants in the U.S. His agenda is all political. If it is all leftist politics, immigrants will forever empower leftists in Washington. And that's his agenda is to make every state blue.
Yes.
Because then the leftists will rule and reign forever. And who knows? Maybe that's what God has in mind. I don't know. None of us know the future. I just know that it does not look very promising. I'm certainly hoping that the election of 2016 can turn things around. Is it too late? We don't know. I think we always need to be hopeful and optimistic that things can turn around. We just don't know God's timetable.
No, we don't. We're going on a break. With us is Jan Markell from Understanding the Times Radio. We'll be back with this conversation on leftism and the spiritual motive behind it. So please stay tuned.
You're listening to Love for the Truth Radio. We'll be right back, so please stay tuned.
If I were the devil, if I were the devil, if I were the prince of darkness, I'd want to engulf the whole world in darkness. And I'd have a third of its real estate and 4/5 of its population, but I wouldn't be happy until I had seized the ripest apple on the tree. So I'd set about, however necessary, to take over the United States. I'd subvert the churches first. I'd begin with a campaign of whispers. With the wisdom of a serpent, I would whisper to you as I whispered to Eve, do as you please. To the young, I would whisper that the Bible is a myth. I would convince them that man created God instead of the other way around. I would confide that what's bad is good and what's good is square. And the old I would teach to pray after me, Our Father, which art in Washington. And then I'd get organized. I'd educate authors in how to make lurid literature exciting so that anything else would appear dull and uninteresting. I'd threaten TV with dirtier movies and vice versa. I'd peddle narcotics to whom I could. I'd sell alcohol to ladies and gentlemen of distinction. I'd tranquilize the rest with pills. If I were the devil, I'd soon have families at war with themselves, churches at war with themselves, and nations at war with themselves, until each in its turn was consumed. And with promises of higher ratings, I'd have mesmerizing media fanning the flames. If I were the devil, I would encourage schools to refine young intellects, but neglect to discipline emotions. Just let those run wild. Until before you knew it, you'd have to have drug-sniffing dogs and metal detectors at every schoolhouse door. Within a decade, I'd have prisons overflowing. I'd have judges promoting pornography. Soon I could evict God from the courthouse, then from the schoolhouse, and then from the houses of Congress. And in his own churches, I would substitute psychology for religion and deify science. I would lure priests and pastors into misusing boys and girls and church money. If I were the devil, I'd make the symbol of Easter an egg and the symbol of Christmas a bottle. If I were the devil, I'd take from those who have and give to those who wanted until I had killed the incentive of the ambitious. And what'll you bet? I couldn't get whole states to promote gambling as the way to get rich. I would caution against extremes in hard work, in patriotism, in moral conduct. I would convince the young that marriage is old-fashioned, that swinging is more fun, that what you see on TV is the way to be. And thus I could undress you in public, and I could lure you into bed with diseases for which there is no cure. In other words, if I were the devil, I'd just keep right on doing what he's doing. Paul Harvey. Good day.
If you just tuned in with us to talk about liberalism, leftism, and the spirit of the Antichrist is Jan Markell, the founder and director of Olive Tree Ministries. Check out her website, olivetreeviews.org. That's olivetreeviews.org. You just listened to a recording of radio host Paul Harvey. He issued a warning to America on April 3rd, 1965. And in this warning, he detailed what he thought the devil should do if the devil wanted to keep destroying the United States. Sadly, the truth is that most of this stuff has come to pass. And what Paul Harvey saw for America's future back in 1965, if the devil had his way, was eerily accurate. Amazing. It's just amazing. Jan, looking at the leftist agenda and its social equality, which we believe will eventually lead us to a one world order. To become a one world order, we first have to deal with the religious convictions to make it a one world faith. And right now, people are being conditioned as never before to accept the great lie, the delusion that will come, his leadership upon everyone who rejects the gospel. In Paul Harvey's warning, he mentioned how the devil would start by subverting the churches to start taking over America. How do you see him accomplishing that, Jen?
Well, subverting the churches, that's been going on forever. It really started in the West, in America for sure. Subverting the churches started with the mainline Protestants in the 1920s. And back then, and they were solid at one time. You had great Methodist preaching, great Presbyterian preaching, and some of the other denominations as well. And then along about the 1920s and into the 1930s, they thought they would become more mainstream, more contemporary, and they began changing their whole style. They went from conservative to very liberal, and it was a disaster. And today, some of these denominations are just they're being left without any people.
Yes.
I used to minister in the churches, Cindy, and I used to go into some of these mainline Protestant churches, even some 25, 30 years ago, and what was left of them, that is, there wasn't much left of them then.
That's right.
And it's what happens when you sell out the gospel. And they did that starting in the 1920s. Now, here's my point.
Okay.
That was bad enough. But today, evangelicals are coming along making the exact same mistake. And if I can name names, I mean, it's even an outfit like the National Association of Evangelicals. When I was a young person, I used to wait for their monthly magazine to come out because it was so right on. It was so on target. It was all about winning the lost while there's time. And now this same organization, the National Association of Evangelicals, under the direction of Leith Anderson, has pulled this organization so far left that he's going to take evangelicalism into the same landmine that the mainline Protestants mistake was made in the 1920s and 30s. The National Association of Evangelicals, now it's all about nuclear disarmament, global warming, environmentalism, no to capital punishment, endless poverty programs. This is liberalism.
Yes.
This is not evangelicalism. So this is the tragedy that I see that has happened here in the 21st century, the last 15 years or so, with some far left leaders, starting with Leith Anderson, and a couple who preceded him, but he's the one who's taken it to the far socialist left. So what's going to happen as a result? How does that trickle down to the churches? I mean, it just leaves the church weak. It leaves the church not knowing where to turn to for help, and leaves the churches sort of, well, should we be fundamental, or should we follow our leadership, who's radical leftist? And if the handwriting wasn't on the wall with the collapse of the mainline Protestants in the last 100 years, apparently it isn't clear to the evangelicals who are making the same mistake. But I've got to say, Cindy, in my lifetime, this is one of the things that troubles me the very most, and that is what's happened to the evangelical church in the last 15 to 20 years.
Absolutely, and I would say the same exact thing. Very grievous, very grievous. And you know, we were talking about the liberal churches now. What they're doing is they brought in the postmodern thought, which we talked about before, which means your truth is your truth, my truth is my truth.
Yes.
Let's put our doctrines aside. Let's all get along under the banner of love and unity. Love, peace, and unity. And everything is love. And we had people rise up like the emergent church leaders. We talked a lot about the emergent church on this show with Rob Bell, Brian McLaren, all of them that have brought in a new theology into the church as well. So, there's nothing new under the sun, though, Jan. When we look back in Genesis 3, the enemy is doing the same exact thing that he did back then, and it's a shame that we don't get it. it's very disturbing that we don't get his twist and get.
Yeah, I mean, I began seeing some very troubling things, even as recently as 5-6 years ago. I mean, Christianity Today, which has gone very left, but didn't used to be 30, 40 years ago, but in the last, 15 to 20 years, far left. I mean, they came out with a front page cover story in 2009 in search of the biblical Adam. They didn't believe that Adam and Eve were real. The title of the article was searching for the biblical Adam. I didn't know he was lost, that we had to go search for him, but in their eyes, he never existed.
Wow.
I mean, the Bible is a myth. The world is billions of years old. Revelation is too complicated to understand, so we won't deal with the book of Revelation. Let's take everything allegorically. Let's leave out all about end times. But this is what's come into our church. I started talking about the 1920s and liberalism, but it's going on right here in 2015. It's just picked up steam and is going pell-mell, and it's terrifying.
Yes, it is terrifying. And, what you mentioned, that the Bible is a myth, Genesis and Revelation is allegorical. Well, guess what? They're teaching this in our Bible colleges and seminaries.
Right.
So now we have these pastors coming out not believing in the truth of the gospel. I have no idea what they're believing in, because it doesn't make sense if you think that they're just myths. It doesn't make sense at all. So how has this leftist philosophy influenced and affected the organized church, and I have to say in a way of culture? Because, no longer, we're not a light. I mean, the church is supposed to be a light to this dark world, a salt to this earth. So if the church begins to die and does not have the right message and the light goes out, well, then guess what? The culture begins to come into the church, and that's what we're having right now. So why don't we talk about that, Jan? How has the leftist philosophy influenced and affected the organized church?
Well, again, liberalism is a cancer. It is an absolute cancer, and we even have. I carry a product in my at my website. My website, by the way, is olivetreeviews.org, but it's called the Cult of Liberalism, and liberalism is very nearly exactly that, a cult. And when you start to let it have its way, it's going to focus again on social justice. When we saw in June the White House lit up with the colors of the gay agenda, I mean, how many of our hearts were broken?
That's right.
To see the highest office, not only in the land of America, but in a sense, the White House in Washington D.C. is the capital of all capitals of the entire world, and here the leader of the free world was embracing homosexuality by lighting up his White House with the People's House, by the way, with the colors of the gay agenda, the rainbow colors. But all of that's trickling into the church, and we've got gay marriages going on in some of our evangelical churches, and the pastors and the people are just thrilled that they're contemporary, they're with it, they're modern, they're contemporary, they're diverse, they're multicultural.
Yes.
They're inclusive.
Yes, the whole liberal package is what they've become. And, and then when I was thinking about social justice, that was a buzzword amongst the churches not too long ago. They were all getting involved in their social justice type ministries, and if you remember that it's time to get missional. I don't know if you had that.
Yes.
Here on the East Coast, we saw a lot of that, and so they were just buying into it and jumping on the bandwagon and going for the liberalism there, not even knowing it though, thinking that they were doing great deeds or whatever. And then you look at Bruce Jenner, Caitlyn, that got what was it, the badge of honor or courage?
Exactly. I watched that online. It was one of the most shocking things for him to get her to get a standing ovation by all those folks in Hollywood. But I guess to be expected.
It is to be expected, but the sad thing about it is we don't take care of our veterans. I had to put that in there. The ones that shed their blood for the freedom of this country that we are starting to lose after they lost limbs and legs or whatever, and we're losing our freedom and our liberties now because of this cult, this liberalism cult or religion. And here we're patting Bruce Jenner or Caitlyn Jenner on the back for his or her courage. Well, let's talk about the results of a watered-down, seeker-friendly, grace-focused gospel because of the leftism thought. I want to give our listeners, paint a picture of what we're talking about in the church. Like, all right, so some people say, okay, so there are those that believe that in the church. But we've actually, that whole liberalism or more tolerance came in with Bill Hybels as well. That has, well, back in the, probably about 5-6 years ago, he had about 80,000 pastors come to his summit leadership meetings. And the people that he had to speak in his conference were very liberal-minded leaders that were not even Christians, which a lot of them were not Christians at all. And here, these pastors and leaders of the churches were walking away with that kind of mindset, which is very, very sad. So we have a lot going on. Do you have other thoughts, Jen, that you want to share as far as that?
Well, I mean, I think the Hybels have done, and Lynn Hybels has done every bit as much damage as her husband Bill has done. And of course, Lynn is the spokesperson for the so-called Christian Palestinian movement that she is just very pro-Palestinian and believes they have the right to the land. And I've heard her in person as she gives these seminars. She gave one at my alma mater, Bethel University in St. Paul, Minnesota. This was 2-3 years ago. And she was up there telling blatant untruths about God's covenant land that was defending, and certainly not every Palestinian is a barbarian. I would never want to make such a statement.
Right.
And there are actually Palestinian Christians we need to be praying for. We need to be praying for all of them, for that matter, because many of them need the Lord. But Lynn Hybels has just done unspeakable damage to evangelicalism, as has Rick Warren. And I'd already named the name of Leith Anderson. I could name other names, but those are certainly the 3 or 4 big hitters right there that have just harmed the church more than I think. I don't think it will ever recover because of these folks. Yeah,
and they focused a lot on the leaders. And look at Rick Warren. I think Rick Warren, I want to know your thoughts on it, but it seemed like he leaned more towards the social justice type of religion. But anyway, we can talk about that on the other side of the break. With us is Jen Markell from olivetreeviews.org, olivetreeviews.org. Please stay tuned. You don't want to miss what we're going to be talking about next, the seduction and delusion that's coming into our culture.
In 2 Timothy chapter 3, we read that men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, without self-control, fierce, despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying the power thereof. From such turn away. They will be ever learning and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. Thank you for having a love for the truth.
Welcome back. Our guest today is author, ministry founder, and radio host Jen Markell. Jen hosts Understanding the Times with co-host Eric Barger, a broadcast which airs on almost 700 stations across North America. Jen Markell also hosts one of the largest apologetics conference every fall, Understanding the Times, out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. Check out her website, olivetreeviews.org. That's olivetreeviews.org. You know, in the intro, we were talking about how we were promised in America change, and we got it. And now many are concerned about those changes that are going on in our political education systems, as well as our societies and cultures. It's obvious that our president and many of our government leaders and church leaders alike have their minds set on liberal goals that are much different from our Judeo Christian law of ethics. And now it is obvious that we are headed in a destructive direction with no moral compass, and that's exactly where we're headed. I wanted to just bring to light, Jen, with our audience about the devil's goals: to rob, steal, destroy, to annihilate by seduction and delusion. And this is definitely the characteristics of the Antichrist spirit. And I believe that he is out to destroy America. And just like Paul Harvey said in his narrative, that if I were the devil, I would whisper the Bible is a myth. I would convince that man created God instead of any other way. I would confide that what bad is good and what good is bad or square. And to the old I would teach to pray after me, our Father, which are in Washington. We just talked about that. But now, how is the devil using leftism to destroy our moral conduct. I mean, we're seeing in our schools today, I remember back in the day, at least when I was growing up, the worst thing a child could do was chew gum and be punished for it and sit out in the hallway. And now we're seeing the absolute worst, and that's other children killing other young children. And that's where we've come to. A lot has to do with the heart of man and the minds of the people. And guess what? We have a lot of changing to do, and it's not towards what we're getting now. And so how is the devil using leftism to destroy our moral conduct, Jen?
Well, I think he's using the entertainment world. And I've interviewed a number of guests who speak into this and who have a little bit of, if not experience, they certainly have some profound insight into the world of entertainment and the fact that a lot of those people are literally selling their souls to the devil to become successful. And if I could just make a little side comment on that, Cindy, because talking about the devil and entertainment, going back to Paris here, there was a rock concert that was one of the venues that was attacked by those terrorists. And in the rock concert venue, there was a death metal group singing. I think they were called Eagles of Death Metal. And the song they were singing when the violence and the bombing and the shooting began, the song they were singing, the death metal group, was Kiss the Devil.
Oh, my gosh.
So the group of young people in this stadium, or really a stadium, it was a hall of some kind, and there are pictures online of all of these young people giving the finger sign of Satan. And then at that point, according to the observer who was there at that point, the shooting and the bombing and the slaughter began. Well, when you glorify Satan, there are consequences.
Yes.
And the entire entertainment world in the last 30, 40 years has become godless. It's certainly immoral. It is exporting sin around the world. And much of that is at the heart of America, is behind it. Hollywood is behind it.
That's right.
Because the entertainment world has literally sold its soul to Satan. Now, that's strong language, but I'm afraid it is the truth. And I have interviewed people on my own radio program that have some insight, if not perhaps experience. In one or two cases, they have some experience. And they will tell you, in order to be successful in Hollywood, you just about have to literally sell your soul to Satan.
Yeah, and I think from what I remember, I know a girlfriend of mine had a video that was very, very detailed on the different groups and the individual singers and vocalists that actually said with their own lips that they did, in fact, sell their soul to the devil. And what's really sad, you look at someone like Katy Perry, and I'm going to mention her name. This is a young girl that grew up in the church. Her parents were supposedly Christians. She wanted wholeheartedly to sing Christian music, and she testified and said she didn't make it in that area, and so she decided to go secular. And here she actually professed on a talk show that she sold her soul to the devil. So
I heard it.
Yeah,
I heard it.
Entertainment and Hollywood will just eat you up and spit you out, use you for your talents and abilities to make money. We've got a lot of the movies that are out there today. And, a lot of the computer games, Jen, you see the young children. I know that my grandkids, like at 2 years old, they know how to work those things. Now, we do watch what they watch, and they can only watch certain shows or whatever, and different children's, GP movies or whatever. But it's amazing that some of these games are very evil, and that the kids learn to be violent with them. And I remember back in the day, I think it was maybe in the 80s, 70s, 80s, when I was bringing up my children in the 80s particularly, there was a lot of talk about watch your kids in these games because they're learning the behaviors from it. And yet today we're not even screening it anymore, and not even in the church. So, folks, you got to watch your kids, because it's going to give them a mindset that you won't want them to have when they're older. So we look at this leftism, this liberalism, this tolerance has entered our culture. And so let's talk about political correctness and how it's destroying every part of our, even our laws, Jen.
Well, yes, political correctness, I think, is, I think it's one of the most dangerous, the most troubling things. It seemed to enter our kind of our sphere of thinking back right after 9/11, when suddenly, if you spoke ill against a Muslim, you definitely were politically incorrect. And
Yes.
And even a president, I appreciated very much. I appreciated George W. Bush, and I feel he did try to keep us safe after 9/11. But, he made the politically correct statement right after 9/11 that Islam is a religion of peace, and that started an era of PC that has only gotten worse and worse and worse and worse. And could it bring down this country? You bet it could. So political correctness is destroying everything. It's no longer cool to even be patriotic. I mean, what is celebrated is the slamming of America as the left loathes America. Capitalism is hated. Christianity is hated. God is hated. And it's because the left is out of control. They are in control, but they're out of control.
That's right.
And they don't like patriotism. They don't like the flag. They don't like the Star-Spangled Banner. I mean, it's a tragic thing that's happened here in the last, particularly the last 7 years. But I mean, it goes back further than that.
And it doesn't like our Constitution. I had to add that.
That's right.
Doesn't like our Constitution, and yet the Constitution was written to protect us. And and here it's not even being upheld anymore. So we, at this point, what laws do we have? I think of that postmodern thought again, suggests that your truth is your truth, my truth is my truth. So we don't have to agree, but we just have to get along. And political correctness helps us do just that. All we have to do is tiptoe around everyone's feelings so as not to offend anyone. Political correctness and leftism, like I said before, are guiding our course straight to the throne of the Antichrist, and it is moving with great pace. And,
right, but he won't be politically correct. The Antichrist won't be. He will be an absolute, total dictator.
That's right.
He doesn't care what you have to say. He only cares what he has to say and what he's thinking about, and he will crush every voice of dissent. So that's on the horizon. Barack Hussein Obama is a foreshadowing of all of that.
Yes, and that's what I was going to say, because he doesn't want to listen to a lot of people. And what cracks me up, in Congress we have a lot of Republicans, but I don't understand. He's constantly writing his executive orders to bypass anything that they have to say. That I know, but it just is amazing how nothing seems to be done, to stop this man from doing what he thinks is right.
Well, yes, and there seems to be some fear on the part of the right. I've had Michelle Bachmann on my program many times.
Yes.
She was one of my conference speakers in October, and she just believes that the right is basically bowing to this religion of leftism, and is afraid of it and doesn't want to tackle it, and just succumbs to it almost in a seduction.
Yes.
So we need to be electing some bold leaders, please.
Absolutely. So let's talk about this. How is leftism destroying our religious convictions? Obviously it's taking away a lot of our freedoms, but let's talk about how it's destroying our religious convictions, Jen.
Well, they are being destroyed. Kim Davis was jailed a couple. She's the young woman who was standing up for traditional marriage. She was thrown in jail for a week or so. That's a foreshadowing what's coming to America. That's a foreshadowing of what's coming to America. I guarantee you that is coming to America in droves. This is going to be happening, I would say, before Barack Obama leaves office. It depends on who gets elected in 2016, if that's going to continue or if we have some mercy in that department. But if you love America, if you love God, if you love freedom, you're going to be in the crosshairs. I think we're going to be losing some internet freedom because of net neutrality. But again, these are all tools of the left. They are tools of the religion of leftism, tools of the religion of liberalism, and it is out to destroy, but more than that, it is out to control. And they have no mercy. You cannot counter them. They have to be in total control. And there's some scary days coming. If God doesn't have mercy on us and get some solid conservative in Washington, we don't have a future.
That's right. And we need to start praying for that really right now, because just pray for that God's grace would be upon us and we'd have more time. There's a lot of people that need to be saved. You know, I think of this tolerance, Jan, and how every other cult and religion is tolerant except for Christianity. And except for the Jews as well. And I think that's what's amazing. So we know that there's obviously a spiritual warfare going on right now. The enemy, who is the evil one, is against anything that stands for Jesus Christ. And so a lot of our religious freedoms we're going to see are being taken away. I mean, there's a lot of persecution in other countries. Well, guess what? We might have to face some persecution here in our own country. And I think of those hate crimes. You know, God forbid if you say anything against anyone else's religion, it's a hate crime. We can be locked up, like you said, like Kim Davis. But yeah, we can have our heads chopped off. And I have, not to say we can have our heads chopped off and nothing's really done about it. So anyway, we're going on a break. With us is Jan Markell from olivetreeviews.org, olivetreeviews.org. We'll be right back to talk about the influence of leftism, nationalism to globalization, and how it's affecting not only the United States but worldwide. So please stay tuned.
You're listening to Love for the Truth Radio. We'll be right back, so please stay tuned. In 2 Timothy chapter 3, we read that men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, without self-control, fierce, despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying the power thereof. From such turn away. They will be ever learning and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. Thank you for having a love for the truth.
Well, we are in our final segment. With us is veteran and contender of the faith, Jan Markell, to talk about the spirit of the Antichrist and how it pertains to the religion of leftism or liberalism. And Jan, you were talking about that what just took place in Canada is a game changer. And so why don't we talk about what's going on? You mentioned it as a trend that seems to be going on everywhere, and now it's coming a little bit too close to home.
Yeah. Well, Canada had a wonderful Prime Minister, Stephen Harper. He was an evangelical Christian. He was pro-Israel. He was one of Israel's final allies on the planet, and he was unseated and defeated back on October 19th. And in his place is a young man, Trudeau is his name. I don't know his first name, but Prime Minister Trudeau is a young man who's very Islam-friendly, who's far left. His agenda is abortion, gay marriage, global warming, redistribute the wealth, and, of course, Canadian conservatives and Christians are broken-hearted. But I only raise this because, again, this cult of liberalism, it's infecting everything, and we've talked about the church and entertainment, etc. But it's even taken over in Canada. Obviously, it's taken over in America. Obviously, we opened the whole program talking about how it's taken over Europe. So, is there a satanic agenda, so to speak, that is prompting this cult of liberalism to be raising its ugly head all over the world, even Canada, which has always been a pretty conservative country, and now it's under the rule of a young, hardcore leftist man, Mr. Trudeau, who's going to take it in the same direction Barack Obama is taking America. Is this, again, just setting the stage for the Antichrist? I think if there's one conclusion I would draw from our discussion, it would be that the entire globe is preparing the world for the Antichrist.
Yeah, it seems that way, doesn't it? Almost in every area. We've been talking about all the areas. And we did not mention, maybe we can back up just a little bit, Jan, and just mention about how leftism is destroying our educational system, because I think it's really, really important so that parents and people that are listening know what to do. I mean, do you know anything about the Common Core agenda?
Well, I've done a program or two on Common Core, and I've never had children, so I haven't had to go. I have not had to deal with our American education system. But a program or two I've done on Common Core. It's a type of teaching and an education system. It's one size fits all, and it's just training students to become good little global citizens. It's training them to be good members of the coming one world system. And that's what teachers have told me, and parents who have pulled their kids out of Common Core. But again, it's part of the leftist agenda. Again, it's part of the religion of leftism or liberalism. And it's part of the agenda of when government becomes God, then you follow the dictates of government when it comes to education. And right now, that would be Common Core, and that would be training kids to be good little global citizens.
Absolutely. And I know that it's teaching our children how to think, not what to think for themselves. So I know that's like the big premise there, is how they're telling them how to think, and we have to be careful of that. I'd like to do a show actually on Common Core, and probably in the near future. So anyway, we talked about before how our Constitution, which was based on Judeo Christian ethics and law, is no longer being supported. Obviously, it's not. We see the Ten Commandments being ripped down off of the judiciary walls. Of course, back in, 63, prayer taken out of our schools. And now what do we have? We have Common Core coming into the schools, telling our kids how to think instead of prayer and God telling us how to think. So, in your opinion, is it because, it is the leftist agenda that our Constitution is being overlooked. But how, let's just give another example of that, Jan, if you can think of one.
Of what now? Excuse me.
About the laws that protect evil. I mean, we talked about the LGBT. I feel like some of these laws that we have now are protecting more evil than they are good.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know that I can cite specific laws, but remember the Bible says in Isaiah 5:20 that in the last days, good will be called evil and evil will be called good. And I think that's completely on overdrive now. I mean, everything that was once evil is now being celebrated. We've already talked about the White House being lit up in the colors of the rainbow flag, etc. So we're just in a new day. We're in a new and a very tragic day. But again, it's because I believe it's because the world is setting the stage for a man with a plan to come in and sort of fix everything that's gone haywire. The problem is he won't fix it. He'll totally destroy it. And the world will come under God's judgment during the time known as the tribulation.
Yes, and we're headed very quickly to that right now, I believe. You know, when we were listening to that narrative by Paul Harvey, he said, if I were the devil, I'd take from those who have and give to those who wanted until I had killed the incentive of the ambitious. And, you know, when we look at the leftist agenda on social equality, I see where that will lead us, in fact, to a one-world order. You know, the less ambitious, the more government control, and that's what we're having right now. I wanted to talk, Jan, about the open borders. They gained a certain mainstream status in the 1990s as the globalization and multilateralism fads of the decade encouraged talk of a world without borders. I don't know if you remember that. And the decline, even the demise of the nation state. What's your thoughts on that?
I would just encourage folks to be watching the forthcoming United Nations, what they can watch perhaps online. I don't know if it's be covered on cable TV or not. The forthcoming UN convocation, the Pope will be there. I believe Obama will be there. This is coming up November 30th through December the 11th.
Okay.
And I just think that it's going to be dealing with climate change, which is just another leftist ramrod thing that's going on, climate change. God changes climate. Mankind doesn't change climate.
Right.
But what's going on, it'll be sustainable development and other things that are going to be talked about November 30th through December 11th at the United Nations with the Pope, Barack Obama, and many, many, many other global leaders. Keep your eyes on it. I believe it's another game changer, this time a little different category than what we've talked about. But again, it's all the leftist agenda. All that they will be talking about will be the leftist agenda, will be global government, the one world system, how we all have to fall in line to be good global citizens. And again, this just leaps out of the pages of the book of Revelation. It's just shocking how up-to-date John the Revelator was.
Yes. Well, I think what's interesting with the Pope is when he came to Philadelphia, I know his big agenda, even though it was supposed to be on family, he talked a lot about the climate change. In fact, if we don't comply to the laws of climate change, then we are sinning. So we can see how this religion is kind of mixing in with the political correctness and the liberalism and everything that we talked about. And think about Pope getting together with some of the high evangelicals.
Yes.
I think that's very interesting. What do you know about that, Jen?
Well, I know folks like Rick Warren would like for a little bit more ecumenical unity with Rome. So I think some of this is probably falling into place.
And I know that he is in cahoots with Tony Blair on the Faith Foundation.
Yes.
I believe so. We see things that are happening there that are coming together. And I know that the Pope got together with Copeland and Robeson and, some of the other evangelicals last winter, or around January, February, in a meeting coming together with them.
Did.
Yeah, and it just seems like there's some kind of agenda happening there. And we know, and I think you would agree too, that these, the ones that he has met with, I don't believe are preaching the gospel truth.
Well, I was quite troubled. This is a year ago now, when he did unite with Kenneth Copeland, and Copeland seemed to, Tony Palmer was the representative for the Pope, and Tony Palmer, who's actually an Anglican, was an emissary of the Pope to try to get some evangelicals and Pentecostals aligned with the Vatican, and that is troubling. And some particular, starting with Copeland and Robeson, I think those were the two most prominent ones anyway, that were very outspoken that they were in favor of this. Well, my goodness, do they not know the book of Revelation? Do they not know there's coming a one world religion? Do they not know that the book of Revelation talks about, well, a scenario that if it isn't the Vatican, I don't know what it is. It's so obvious. It's just painful. And then to see some of these guys come alongside of them is just shocking. But it is end times. It's very end time-ish. And again, it's very one world religion is the name of the game, and that's where it's headed.
Yeah, and and I was talking to someone today. We were discussing a matter and talking about the spirit of the Antichrist and how when the Lord came, he was here when he said Antichrist is in the world even now. And so even by the starting from the time he was crucified and was raised, and the church began, Antichrist was right there. And guess what? Through the years, he's gotten stronger and more evident and fruitful. But what's interesting is that there's a great deception and there's a great delusion. We look at Matthew 24. We talked about that many times on our show, how when the disciples asked the Lord, when will we know the sign of your coming? And he said there'll be wars, rumors of wars, earthquakes in various places. But then he goes on to say, take heed that no man deceive you. And he said that 4 times in the Olivet Discourse. So we know that one of the signs of his return is great deception. And I know, John, that you would agree with that, is the great deception that's happening right now. Absolutely, yes. I mean, it's not just in the church. It's deception, politically, and every venue, the deception is overwhelming. And again, I believe it's a setup. It's a setup for this man with a plan who's going to be the ultimate deceiver. He's known as the Antichrist. I think he's waiting in the wings. But see, I believe the hour is that late.
Not every one of your listeners may agree with that, but that's my own personal opinion.
I know you had mentioned eschatology. Did you want to talk about that?
Well, I think we have, because I've certainly made reference to the Antichrist here every few minutes, and that's very end-time-ish, and I believe we're in the last of the last days. I believe the church is not going through that tribulation. Therefore, I think that the rapture is what the Bible says. It's imminent. It's at any moment, and that means we're not waiting. The church is not waiting for the Antichrist. The church is waiting for the return of Jesus Christ to call his church home. He doesn't beat up his bride. But the unbelieving world is going to go through a terrible, terrible time known as the tribulation, followed by another 3 years known as the Great Tribulation. That's not for the church. That's reserved for the world that has rejected Jesus Christ. I believe it's right over a horizon. I believe if we listen very closely, we can almost hear the hoofbeats of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse.
We're going on a break, so please stay tuned. We'll be back with Jan Markell to wrap up the segment, and Jan will offer some advice and her personal contact information.
You're listening to Love for the Truth Radio. We'll be right back, so please stay tuned.
I want to personally thank you for listening to Love for the Truth Radio. Please visit our website at www.loveforthetruthradio.com. That's www.loveforthetruthradio.com. Well, we've had a wonderful conversation with Jan Markell. Again, she's a veteran contender of the faith. And we did have a very detailed conversation on the religion of leftism and liberalism and how the spirit of the Antichrist is presently with us now. Jan, can you offer some advice to our listeners? I know some of them are probably saying, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Everything's falling apart. Deception and delusion is here. Can you just offer some encouragement?
Well, the Bible tells us to be salt and light, and I believe that we also need to delay the decay as much as we can. And, we've talked about some scenarios where it's not always possible because it's just, government control and other issues don't allow us the complete and total freedom that we would like to have anymore. But to delay the decay, to be salt and light, to share the gospel while there is time, while we still have an opportunity, while the internet is still relatively free, while the airwaves are still relatively free, that could all go away in a week or 2 or 3. We just don't know. We could have the fairness doctrine come back when you and I can't say what we want to say. So I think we need to be acting really swiftly and, as I say, delay the decay, be salt and light, share the gospel while we can. I'm not sure we can do much more than that, Cindy.
Yeah, that's it. And be ready. Be personally ready for the return of Jesus Christ.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. John, can you give us your contact information if somebody would like to get in touch with you personally?
Well, best to go through my website. It's the ministry is Olive Tree Ministries, and I have been going on here for about over 30 years now and been on radio since 2001. Please check out my radio program, Understanding the Times Radio. You can find all that information at olivetreeviews.org. We have a wonderful store. We're just off of our conference, so we have those products available. And I just want to say I appreciate greatly, Cindy, the opportunity to share with you and your listeners. And it's great to hear from them, and it's great to hear from you, and keep up the excellent work.
Oh, thank you, Jan. And you also, you've been a wonderful servant. You've definitely spoken to my life for many, many years through your radio program. So I want to thank you personally, Jan. Blessings to you, your family, your ministry, and God bless you, audience, and we'll talk to you, see you next week.